G'day, my name's Gordon Dedman and welcome to another episode of Bushcraft Survival. In this episode, we're going to be looking at how to make a 4-man lean-to shelter thatched with cabbage tree palm leaves. We're also going to be having a look at how to make a fire reflector and a springy bough bed. Helping me with the first part of the shelter is my mate Matt. The rest of the shelter I'm going to be completing on my own. And as you'll see, shelter building is quite time consuming. So you have to allow a good period of time. Now this is a 4-man shelter, so if you had 4 people, this would be a lot quicker and easier to construct. I've chosen an area that is out of the prevailing wind. It's free of deadfall from falling from gum trees. Blue gums particularly drop their limbs, so I've searched around the area to select a good site that is safe. It's not on any game trails, it's not on any ants' nests. However, all around this area there are ticks, the paralysis ticks, which are pretty nasty on the mid-north coast. And there's also the odd leech. But unfortunately, when you go out into the bush, you can't always escape those sort of things. It's just part and parcel of it. So the shelter we're going to construct is the classic lean-to shelter, and we're going to be thatching it with cabbage tree palm leaves. And the reason why we've chosen that is because they're the most plentiful in the area. You need to choose a thatching material that is going to be quite common in your area, but there's enough of it that you're not going to denude the bush in any sort of way. You'll also see that we're using dead cabbage tree palm leaves for 2 reasons. One, dead leaves don't shrink, so because of that it enables good watershed, because if you use green leaves they shrink and then it leaves holes in your thatching. And the second reason is by using dead leaves we're not harming the tree unnecessarily, and we're letting people coming after us enjoy the bush. So let's crack on. Well, today I've got Matt here to help me, and we're going to build a lean-to shelter. We already have our supports which we've collected. We've got some vines and other cordage which we're going to tie it together. We've got some cabbage tree palm leaves, as well as a whole stack of other things we're going to thatch it with. So far what we've done is, using dead cabbage tree palm leaves, we've thatched from the bottom end all the way across. Once we've reached the one end, we then proceeded another row on top of that, ensuring that we have an overlap of half. That way we achieve good watershed. Once we reach that end, we just came back across again, ensuring that we have that overlap by half. And we've reached this point up here. The reason why we're using dead cabbage tree palm leaves is if you use green cabbage tree palm leaves, once they dry, they shrink. And unless you want water coming through your shelter, it's best to use dead ones. Plus, on top of that, we're not harming the cabbage tree palms in any way because these have naturally shed their leaves already. Now, I haven't got Matt to help me for the rest of the shelter, so I'm going to have to continue on my own. These cabbage tree palm leaves, even though they're dead, they're very, very brittle. So you find that you break a lot of them. Now we're after a stem. This is probably a little bit too long. And all we're doing is threading it in between the lattice work that we've created. But they are very brittle and you'll end up breaking a few. We have now finished thatching the back of our shelter, and what we're going to go on with now is thatching our eave. And one of the reasons we've constructed this eave in this manner is it allows us, once it's built, to have a greater area inside to work with, and we have a greater area for protection against the rain. And once we put sides on this shelter, and in conjunction with a fire and a reflector, it allows more warm air to bounce around inside this 4-man shelter. So we're going to go ahead now and thatch the eave with our cabbage tree palm leaves. So we've now finished thatching our eave. We're still not done yet because I have to go along and get yet another layer of palm leaves to stick over our apex of our eave so we don't get any water in there. There's still a small gap in there, and I'm going to lift this heavy log. This log that you see up here is to weigh everything down. So we'll lift that up, we'll get some more palm leaves, and we're going to cover this apex. Then I will get this log, actually I'm going to get another one that's a bit straighter, and then stick it over the top to weigh that down. And then we're going to have a nice waterproof covering so water can bead off the back or down the front. You'll also notice that I've gone ahead and trimmed off all these branches that were protruding through. And you need to do that because if you don't, when it rains, the water hits those and it just traps down underneath under that pole and you'll get dripping all night. And that's a bit of a pain. So you want to make sure you cut those off. Well, we've finished our thatching on the back of the shelter and the front. We've reinforced the eaves, and we've got an extra layer of cabbage tree palm right across the apex of the shelter. To weigh that down, I've got a log across the top. Now, a lot of these leaves are quite stiff in the position they died on the tree, so they will settle over time. Particularly with some rain, they'll start to settle and they'll actually mesh with each other really, really well. So just for the time being, we've got a log just to weigh those down over the apex of the shelter. Now, we will go ahead and put some sides on this, but this shelter is actually good to go as it is. The colder the climate gets, obviously the need to have walls on the side is going to be more important to stop those cold breezes. But in a nice warm environment like this, this is good to go as it is. This is a very simple knot called the surgeon's knot, and I've used this throughout the making of this shelter. It's just the first part of tying up your shoelace. Cross it over at the back. Cross it over at the front. And you just keep on going all the way around like that. Doesn't put any pressure on the cordage, and it holds it nice and secure, much easier than a clove hitch. It does the same thing because it binds on itself. Nice and simple. Once you're done, you just tuck in any excess, it'll sort of go around again. And you just tuck in any extra bits if you can find a gap. Very simple knot, very secure. Well, we've finally finished our side wall. We've used green cabbage tree palm leaves. It's not as crucial that we use dead palm leaves on the walls because it's not protecting us from the rain. It just needs to keep the heat in. So what we've got there is perfect. As you can tell, it's just started to rain, and so far we haven't got any drops coming through. But while I'm in here, I'm now going to look for any light patches, and any light patches I see, I'm then going to fix those up and plug them up with some more palm leaves. But other than that, it's feeling pretty good. We've only got one more side wall to do, and then we can put down some bedding and make a fire and our reflector wall. Well, we've got the framework for our last side on, and we have some uprights and we have some cross beams. Now I've woven the cross beams in, and if you weave the cross beams incorrectly, you'll find you don't have too much need to put the cordage on, because pressure will hold it together. The most crucial ones are to actually tie the tops of these uprights in. But that's actually quite sturdy, and what we can go ahead now is to get some more cabbage tree palm leaves, and we'll start thatching this last side. We've now finished putting both sides on our shelter. So we've got a roof, an eave and two sides. We're now going to go ahead and make a fire reflector, which is going to allow heat from the fire to be reflected into that shelter. Then we'll construct a bed. But the heavens are just about to open, it's about to bucket down, so we better crack on with it. Well, we've finished our fire reflector. I've collected some logs. We've got some upright posts which I've sharpened at one end and chamfered at the other end. And we've driven those into the ground to create a framework that we can put the logs up. Just for added security, I've used some cordage from our cabbage tree palm stems to tie those ends together. And what this will do is once we light a fire on our fire lay we've already prepared, is once that fire's lit, that will then reflect the heat, the radiant heat from this reflector back into the shelter. Now in a warm environment it's not as crucial, but in a cold environment that's very, very important. So that's going to stop all the heat loss which is going out in that direction. That's going to reflect that back into the shelter and keep us nice and warm. It also acts as a bit of a windbreak, so when there is a bit of a wind blowing it's going to aid to protect that fire a little bit. I've gone and collected some long logs to the best size I can and just broken them against the tree. A little bit long, but it's the best I can do without having to cut through with the saw because it's a lot of extra work. I've then gone and got some of the tops of the some branches, which is some springy boughs, and we've got a whole stack of bracken fern. And what we're going to construct now is a bed. We're going to a makeshift bed that we can make, which doesn't take too long, which will get us off the ground and going to prevent heat loss through conduction to the ground. Now in a cold climate this is absolutely crucial that you get yourself above the ground. So first of all we've made our frame. Now we can stake that out if you like, but it's not essential to do this. We might do that afterwards. So I've got a frame. Now if you're 4 people in here, obviously that would take up the whole area, but it's just myself, so I've just constructed a single bed. I'm then going to get some of these branches from some trees, and I'm going to lay those across the bed. And this is going to create like a springy bough bed, like a posture sprung bed, if you will. And what this is doing, I'm trying to confine these branches inside our framework here so they don't sort of splay out on me. And that's creating a framework which is getting me off the cold ground. Have to test and adjust a few things here to get it just right. Okay, we've got our springy boughs inside the framework. We're now going to go ahead and stick some bracken fern on top of that. This is going to aid in a softer bed. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to start at the top. Now there's loads of bracken fern, so I can just keep on going, getting as much as I need. Now this is going to compress over time, so we're going to have to continually add to this as it compresses. And there we have it. There's our springy bough bed. Now, we want the overall size to be above our framework, because what's going to happen is when we sit on that or lie on that, it's going to compress. And ideally, you don't want it to compress beyond the height of your support beams, because if you have a fire, and in a cold area we could have a small fire much closer, you don't want to stop that radiant heat from the fire getting to you because you sink below the horizontal support beam. So it's very important that we actually keep putting layers on so that we lie above that. But it's not very cold at the moment, so we don't have to worry about that too much. But the proof's in the pudding, so let's lie down and give it a test. You know, I must say, that's pretty comfortable. In fact, I'm very much looking forward to spending the night in here. I'm still above the framework here, and those springy boughs have given a nice posture sprung feeling. It really is quite nice. And there's no need for me to have a mattress underneath me because I can feel them off the ground. And because I'm off the ground, I'm going to prevent heat loss through conduction to the cold ground. In the cold environment, this would be absolutely crucial. In fact, anyone in a cold environment, you could have the best sleeping bag in the world, and if you don't have any form of insulation underneath you, you're going to be cold all night. So it's absolutely marvellous having a bed made out of just what you find in nature. So this is where the fire reflector really comes into its own. The radiant heat from that fire will now bounce from that reflector back into the shelter, and because we've got sides on our shelter and our weave, it's going to let that warm air circulate even more. And we're off the ground on our raised bed, so we're going to be nice and comfortable. And the fire doesn't need to have to be any bigger than that. And if I wanted to improve that fire reflector, all I need to add some dirt on there, add some water, and I can put a coating of mud just to stop any flames from licking at that surface. But I'll monitor that very carefully so that the fire isn't any closer to that fire reflector than it is now. But that's very easy to get some dirt and throw over the base of that reflector. But it also actually helps protect the fire against the wind. And if we're getting a lot of wind from another area, I could actually contain that and build another side to that reflector as well. I've got my tripod over the top, and I've got a couple of different cooking suspension systems there, but there are a few others we could construct if we had more time to do so. Well, all in all, it took about 2 complete days to finish this shelter. I had a little bit of help from Matt at the start, but then I was on my own. If I had 4 people, we'd probably get the shelter knocked off in about, well, just over half a day. But it is a lot of work, however, it is very, very rewarding. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode on how to construct a lean-to shelter using cabbage tree palm leaves. My name's Gordon Dedman, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of Bushcraft Survival.